to use our voice and our ability to be heard and the freedoms that we've been given that maybe we don't even realize other people don't have, to be able to stand up for those people whose voices may not be as heard as ours.
Everybody knows what's trending right now. It's like the biggest thing trending is the protests and the riots and everything happening with George Floyd, which first off, let's start off the show. And let's just say from the Trending Stories Taking Over show, at least for me personally, what happened to George Floyd was wrong.
Disgusting.
100%
disgusting.
wrong.
Wrong's not even a strong enough word for it.
Yeah, I agree. There's nothing that could have possibly happened that justified what happened for George Floyd.
9 minutes too long. 1 minute is too long.
Oh, absolutely.
The positioning of itself is not.
No, as soon as you have somebody detained, game over. But like, here's the issue that I have. The issue that I have is that now it's getting to the point where we all see this as a country. We're already so divided as is with everything that's going on. And the violent side of this is making us more divided.
100%.
However, the protesting side, I think this is a really great time for change. I think this is one of the first times Luke and I were talking about it. This is one of the first times it feels like change is actually in our grasp.
Right.
It sucks so bad that this is the circumstance it had to come to in order for this momentous amount of support for the Black Lives Matter community, the All Lives Matter community, just the like anti-oppression that like cops have shown in the past. Like, I think this is a good opportunity for us to stand up about it. But violence is never the answer.
No, violence is never the answer. And especially because the violence is not coming from, and Steve's talked about this, violence is not coming from the people that are trying to make a difference. No, violence is coming from outside groups. And there's actually James O'Keefe, I forget the name of his Project Veritas. They just released today, and we're not going to show it here, and I haven't watched it yet, but I'm excited for it. Well, excited is a weird word, but they infiltrated a group called Antifa. And they went behind the scenes and got a lot of information about what they're doing. And it's surprising. There was another inside Antifa I saw about a year ago. And that's a scary group. And that is one of, if not the group that is organizing a lot of stuff that's happening. And Steve said something about outside agitators that I think is really important to say. The protesters that want a difference, for the most part, are not the people taking violence.
Right. No,
that's not
the rioters.
right?
They're not the people.
Of course not. They're the people that want to like make amends and see this end. Yeah. They're the people that want to see this end. And I just like I think it's a little strange for me, being honest with you. And I was thinking about this morning. It's a little strange for me to come in and to talk about an issue like this as a room full of white men.
Yeah, right? 100%.
And to me, it feels like there's almost now this idea that what we're saying is not conducive to what the Black community or what the minority groups that are facing this oppression are trying to say. But what I do think is important to realize is right now we have an opportunity as white men and as people as Americans and as the people that run this podcast to use our voice and our ability to be heard and the freedoms that we've been given that maybe we don't even realize other people don't have, to be able to stand up for those people whose voices may not be as heard as ours.
Yeah.
And that's just what I see about today.
I think there's a lot that goes into this. And I think the biggest thing is that this is a nuanced situation. This isn't an absolute one way or the other. And I think that's the thing that I see that makes me concerned is the absolutes that come out of this that says one thing bad, all things bad. Right. That's not how it works. And and by the way, one thing good, not all things good. Right. No. That's the problem. And it's not a one or the other. So it's going to take time and it's going to take patience. Yep. And it's going to take you and I, meaning people in this room, people watching or listening to this, making a concerted effort when we see something. So if we see injustice, to do something about it, say something about it, and not stay silent, right?
Well, and that's part of the problem I've run across. We've talked about, I don't know what I don't know right now. And I just need to be open to understand what's going on and being able to separate so that we don't have the violence with the true message. We need to be able to filter things out. And I need to be open to hear too.
Yeah. And the concern is the violence is taking the biggest part of it right now.
Well, and that's the news media's format anyway.
Well, and I mean, we're in a room right here where two of us specifically, Chris and Steve, you've dealt with potential shutdowns and shutdowns at both of the places where you work. Starbucks, Chris.
Right, yep.
Like you said something about somebody driving through the parking lot and then shutting down or something like what?
Yeah, well, we had to obey the kind of curfew of Anaheim. So, once it came down, like, hey, everyone needs to be home by, I think it was 6:30 or something like that, or 6. We had to close down at 5, get everything done ready for the next day and just shut down by 5 so that everyone can have time to get home by 6 o'clock and make that curfew. And likewise, the next morning we had to open up late to make sure we stayed within the curfew guidelines and everything like that. Just, Starbucks is what I've seen from COVID all the way through this situation. They really try to be on top of everything to be in cooperation with, kind of the peacekeeping efforts of, the government kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
Kudos to them. But yeah, while we were getting ready to shut down that first day, there was the conspicuous car that kind of drove into our parking lot and, it instantly got our attention because it was just like this total blue hatchback vehicle with like spray painted rims, and even the license plates was spray painted in blue. You're like, that's, that's trouble right there. If
that's not good. That's intentionally not good.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And like they had, it looked
Wait
like
a minute, did Gilbert Arenas show up in your parking lot?
Right, seriously, lottery money used well, I guess. So it was, and you could tell like there was. I mean, I saw it kind of just turn around and I saw the back of it, but it looked like on the front it had something kind of over the windshield, and then other baristas had said that they could see him and it looked like he had like war paint on and stuff like that. But he came in, parked, and like I'm like gonna grab the phone to like call the police, whatever, and then because I'm like, this just looks like bad news regardless. With everything going on in that context, I'm like, this doesn't look good, and I need to be ready to make to protect the customers and everything. So
did you bring your broadsword?
Dude, if I could.
Oh man,
that'd be awesome.
I mean, don't bring your broadsword.
No. Violence is not the answer. But sometimes it can deter. Anyways, the truth of the matter is it looked like almost like he came and was like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to get things going. And then next thing I know, he's taken off. So our assumption was that like, oh, he came to the wrong parking lot. It's a different Starbucks he's supposed to be at. Well,
it's scary when you see stuff like that. I don't know if you guys know about this guy. I looked it up to fact check myself, but this guy, Marvin Haymayer, He in 2004 he created a thing called it the Killdozer, and he went on a rampage.
Wow.
Where he like welded himself inside of like a bulldozer and like armored it out and just took it through stores and like into traffic.
Why?
Yeah. He was just insane. It was in Granby, Colorado, June 4th, 2004.
Just for fun.
Just for fun. He just decided that he was going to pay back the world and drive around his Killdozer.
That doesn't that's
no.
What, did he get stopped?
He's deceased.
He's no longer with us.
He definitely died the day he drove the Killdozer.
Was there any pushes for litigation to have bulldozers banned from the common man, or was that?
I'm pretty sure that the bulldozer was modified.
Oh, okay, sure.
This whole thing started over a zoning dispute, which is really funny. So he was just like the world's most like angry neighbor. And then he basically just did this whole like bulldozer modification thing. And then after that, it doesn't say that anything had changed as far as legislation for bulldozers. I'm sorry.
Right. Well, I think that there's a lot to be said, and I think we could.
But we need to stop people like this. Like that's the point. It's like,
that's
we don't want it to get to this level.
No, that's not okay. And that's no matter what side you're on.
Right.
That's not the answer. Violence isn't the answer. Right. And I've seen so much. And the frustrating part for me is I've seen so much on both sides where it looks like it's all a setup.
Oh yeah.
Like there's some videos. My buddy Jason, who sent me a lot of stuff through the internet that's not necessarily being put out there through media. There's this one guy who's in, I forget what city it is, but it's early in the riots, and he's on a street corner out in front of a big glass building, and it's on TikTok. That's where a lot of these videos are coming out.
TikTok is buzzing, man.
TikTok is big time buzzing. But so he's out on a corner, and he goes, man, I'm not falling for this. And behind him, he's pointing to a stack of bricks that are put there on a pallet. Somebody brought in a pallet of bricks and said, hey, what should you do with those? Totally. He goes, and on the video goes, this is a setup, man. I'm not doing that.
Yeah. Wow. Who puts a pallet of bricks out there?
Antifa.
Like, in front of a glass building?
Yeah, true. Antifa. But like, that's one thing is you have people that are extreme on both sides, right? You have
100%,
you have that person that's going to be putting out the bricks and trying to incite that violence. So like, I don't know if you saw the video of the guy. There was a guy that was riding a bike around the streets of God knows what city. And he just started yelling, start shooting. like on his bike and immediately got arrested.
Wow.
Yeah, that's not good.
No, that's not good at all. Don't incite any violence of any kind.
Well, I mean, it's crazy because that just sounds like crazy nuts, which should definitely be stopped right away.
Right.
But
It's like feeling fire in the theater.
Right. Well, the more I hear about the
EJ,
Antifa, whatever. What?
EJ says build a fort. Yeah.
Okay.
With the bricks?
There you go.
Oh, maybe that's what he should have done.
Because
He
the
should have
wolf
built
can
the
huffing
fort.
and puffing and all he wants, but it'll never go down, baby.
That's right.
Sorry, Chris. I like DJ's idea. He totally should have built the fort.
Darren is with you too. We should ban dozers.
Yeah, Darren says ban dozers.
There you go. Ban
And
dozers.
I'm not even putting comments up. Look, yeah, Darren says ban dozers. EJ says build the fort. I like that. And you know what?
Man.
EJ also said peck dance. He was liking your peck dance.
But see, look.
I learned it from EJ.
yeah, yeah, I think you did, right? Yeah.
But see, look, now we went back. We corrected our error.
Yeah.
Isn't that what we're trying to do in our country
That's
right
right.
now?
That's, you know what? You get a bell for that.
Thank you. And
so
now,
Chris, sorry,
Chris is going to continue
Yeah,
speaking.
continue
There you
your
go.
story.
All I wanted to get to is the more I hear of the writing and everything like that, and I feel like the voice of the people who are trying to say something in these peaceful petitions gets pushed down more and more as we see nothing but the violence being projected by the media and whatever it's going to be, and these things that we have to alter our lives to adjust to the I'd rather Starbucks and companies say, hey, we need to shut down because we encourage you to go listen to the petitioners of this injustice or whatever like that.
Yeah,
Like, that would be
that's a good
amazing.
point.
But instead, no, we're going to do it because we want to stay safe from these other agitators and stuff. And it's like, that is starting to really infuriate me, someone who wants to listen. You know, what is the difference between Black Lives Matters and All Life Matters? Like, what is offensive about that? What's not? Like, what are the things? Because I'll speak thinking I'm intending good.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm saying something completely horrible. I don't know the context, or I don't know what the whole problem is because I haven't lived that way.
I think you just said a really important word is context. And I think that's the part that's being missed in a lot of this is the context of what we're talking about. Like the rioters are coming in. Are they coming in for in the context of actually standing up for what's wrong, or are they just looting shoe stores and trying to make a buck?
Right.
You know, I mean, that's the part where I think it totally ruins what is being done by the protesters that are actually wanting to make a change. So.
I want to say that, like, yes, it totally does. It impedes on what they're trying to do. I don't necessarily think that's ruining it. And in this point,
but
in
it's
time,
taking. I'm saying it's taking away the power.
Yeah, it's taking away from it. But at the same time, I think that these are some of the most powerful demonstrations I've seen in my lifetime, at least.
That's awesome.
And that's something that, like, I mean, to me as.
Wait, but you're saying are you saying demonstrations meaning the people that are outside with signs and like the thing I saw in Denver, people laying down?
The actual peaceful protesters.
Right, not the people that are pulling, that are breaking windows and stealing merchandise.
Obviously not.
Okay, I'm just checking because you have to be careful because a lot of people are saying demonstrations and they're like, well, what do you mean by that?
True.
Right.
Right.
That's all in one. It's all in one setting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can't lump it all. Like I said, it's not absolute. You can't say one bad, one good, all good. You have to be. It's nuance, which is the sucky part because it takes too long.
But I think that for the sake of everybody that's listening to this podcast, listening to what we've just talked about, and for the sake of all of us in the room, I think we all know that we don't want we think the violence is a bad thing.
Right. But it's happening, and we have to be specific.
Sure, yeah. But at the same time, all I'm trying to say is that these protests, sure, if that's a better word, these protests are definitely the most like powerful and reaching ones that I've seen in my entire lifetime. It makes me want to get out there. It makes me want to stand with my friends that are going to these protests and stand for something that I do believe in too. It's just, it's crazy because now you have to protect the rights of these people that are protesting and separate them from this mass group of chaos creators.
Yeah.
And now these people are sitting on the streets, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to provide like milk and water for people who are pepper sprayed or anything that happens in the midst of this riot because of these chaotic people.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to keep the peace amongst their own group. And I think those are the people that are being seen heavily in this time too. I think media is covering the chaos. I think people are following the protesters. I think people are looking into like the good nature.
I think that's a generalization, and I don't think that's 100% true. I think I'd like to believe that.
From my experience with the people that I've talked to about it, that's what I've experienced.
Yeah, and I think we're in a bubble.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think honestly we are. You did go to LA though.
I drove through LA.
You drove through LA. You said you went down. What street did you go down?
We went down Hollywood Boulevard and Sunset, and there was nobody out there. Oof. But we went down.
Eerie, man.
We went down right in front of City Hall, and there was an army. There was literally an army standing outside of City Hall, and it was one of the most. I mean, I was talking to somebody about this. Awe-inspiring, or the word awe doesn't necessarily have to mean
it's not pleasant
positive.
Yeah.
Right. It was the most awe-inspiring thing I'd ever seen.
Would you say eerie?
Yeah, absolutely. It felt like Luke compared it to in the Dark Knight Returns or Rises. Yeah, when Bane starts taking over the city and there's all those armed guards.
What do you think about what happened? What are you going to do about it?
Me? About what's happening now?
I'm being Bane.
Do I need to talk like this?
So here's the deal, people. We're going to go down Hollywood Boulevard on longboards, and it's going to be amazing, but really scary. So don't do it. Just don't suck the deodorant off your shirt.
No.
That's all I have to say. So when Travis actually he was at a protest yesterday. He was in Newport, and I got a call, said, hey, Travis can't come home on time because they're stuck behind a protest.
Oh, cool.
What Travis?
Do you have a sign?
I don't know if you want to comment on this, but what was your experience there? Did you feel like I don't know? Did you feel a little? What did you feel being in the middle of that protest?
I've seen a lot of them on TV, and I was just a little bit. I was a little bit exciting and fun.
Was it scary at all?
Nah.
No, okay, that's good. That's good to know. I mean, I'm glad to hear that it's not something that you're like, oh man, you didn't come home. You slept fine last night, right? You didn't have bad dreams. He was tired. but so I mean, the point is, there are peaceful protests that people are not doing things that are bad, but there are people out there that are taking advantage of the situation. Right. I think that's the bigger problem that I have with it. People are using the situation to justify their own selfish needs. And that is so like, we have to focus on how we can make a difference positively. But some people, like I think Darren said in here, something about people think the violence is the only way to make a change. And I mean, I think that's probably what some people feel. Some people feel that. So,
no, and Darren is right. It is all perspective.
It's 100% perspective.
It's all based on where you came from. And I heard the other day one thing that actually, like, the whole idea of privilege is something that's kind of been like confusing to me. And I know that it is confusing to me because I am privileged, but I never knew how to be able to pin it down and say what that was. And somebody said in a podcast that I was listening to, if you have been pulled over and it turned into a story about how you got let go or how you got off without getting a ticket, that is being privileged. And I was like, that's an interesting way to put it. Like, I've never heard of that before.
Well, but I think that also is missing the point, because so I think something actually Steve and I talked about the other day is when he was working at Disney, and you think about the complaints, the negative versus positive. I'd love for you to talk about that.
Well, basically negative sells. And, you know, if somebody has a negative experience, you're going to hear about it. It's like, I know as an employee there, and when I go there now, if something great happens, I go in and make a comment, because very few people expect the positive. They don't expect the negative, and the negative sells, and people go in and talk about the negatives. So maybe every positive, there's 10 negatives. And I think the same thing's happening in the media right now.
You mean reported, every positive reported, there's 10 negatives reported.
Yeah. And I think people just expect the positive and don't think about it. And I think that we're just, as a society, always looking for the bad side of things.
Yeah. And I did hear in a Joe Rogan episode the other day, which actually it's a Joe Rogan, Kevin Hart. If you listen to Joe Rogan, or if you have any interest, Kevin Hart has a great perspective. They did it before the riots and stuff happened, but it's a very, very good perspective on Kevin Hart, who's a black man, and he has done very well, but he talks about how he did that and how there is need for help in his community that he's wanting to help pour back into. And I think that's the part where I see like people like Kevin being able to have an opportunity to help. However, going back to this point of what Joe Rogan said something about, because Kevin says all the negativity is what sells, and that's what we see. And Joe says, yeah, however, our human nature is to look for the negative so we know where to go away from, like from that early on stages where you're trying to self-preservation, right? So you hear the negative, you pay attention to the negative, because that is something from a survival standpoint that you have to do. So I think that's kind of built in our nature a little bit, but yeah, it's 10 for 1 that's not a good ratio.
No, and I think you talked about earlier, we're in this bubble. And I think that's sort of what you and I have talked about before too. I really don't know what I don't know, because I'm still stuck in this bubble. I don't know of anything overtly that I've ever experienced. And I just assume that everything's the way it is. And there's a lot of communities out there that aren't that way. And I need to just be taught.
Yeah.
I think the
And it's just
assumption is where that becomes a problem. I think the assumption is something that is passed down. I think it's something that is like, we are from this bubble, and we were like, most of us, I can't speak for all of us, but like, I know for me, and I know for you, we came from this bubble. Like, we've been in this bubble our whole life, right? And because of that, we have our assumptions because of how every day goes, how everyday life goes. Our negatives are very different than another group's negatives. But I think it's that same old adage of like, you know what they say about assuming things. Right?
Oh yeah, 100%.
It's going to destroy everything that like this is trying to move past.
Right.
And our view of what's outside the bubble is again tainted by this whole idea that negative sells. And so this is where we need to have the positive, being able to just have the dialogues, get away from the professional agitators and get to the dialogues where we can actually start learning and hearing and seeing.
Yeah. And that's the part that hopefully will come out of this, and there will be some way to stop the violence yet continue the conversation. I think that's the thing I'm assuming is probably the fear of the people that are saying, the protesters that are saying we want change. However, the feeling, because we get concerned about where this all goes, because our news cycle is, and we like, for instance, COVID has not been talked about. However, it still exists. We don't have a vaccine. It's not gone. Yet all of this that's happening, nobody's talking about COVID. So you start to wonder if you're a protester and you're really, really passionate about this and making a change, and you feel like, well, what's just going to come up next? And then this is going to go by the wayside.
Right.
So that's, I think, probably a little bit of the concern about the violence going away, because it is getting so much attention to it and it's staying in the cycle. Does that conversation go away as soon as the violence stops? Hopefully it doesn't.
Well, that's a good point, because the violence is keeping it in the front page. It's just
because it bleeds, it leads. That's what you said the other day.
But the problem is it's also giving the wrong message.
Right.
Yeah, right.
It's turning
Absolutely.
people off, and it's turning people off that need to be in the dialogue.
Yeah. So
I could very much see this happening for the rest of the summer.
You think they could last that long? I mean, it depends. It depends on how actually planned this is. But here's the problem. I have a feeling, and based on the stuff that I'm getting from my buddy and the stuff that I'm seeing outside of this, and the documentary I haven't watched yet on Antifa, I think there is something that's brewing that's way different than what we're hoping for in change. I think this is going to be used as a spring for it to do something very, very different and extremely bad. That's my concern with it continuing. Meaning, it's a China takeover, or it's an infiltration from some other group that is using this as a springboard to get their agenda across. And they have no desire to make any change for society. They just want to rule the world.
Yeah.
Right.
I actually came across a post the other day that, it's one of those ones you read and you're kind of like, okay, this definitely has conspiracy to it, but it has validity concerning the events going into process. But I'm not saying I believe this necessarily as much as, oh, that kind of makes sense. But the whole idea was that, the powers that be were going to, basically get this like pandemic thing going, keep people locked up, away, frustrated, until they finally say, I had enough, and they rise up against, and then, okay, sweet, we're going to put the lockdown on you, and now we're going to be in control. Well, that didn't really happen. We actually did do the part and did the thing, try to do things peacefully. Okay, well, phase 1 doesn't work out. We're going to elicit a race war. We're going to elicit some kind of civil unrest, and then that'll get people fired up, and then we'll be able to put the lockdown on. And so it's like, well, wow, like that's kind of interesting. But at the same time, like, I don't want to buy into those things and be led by fear,
Right.
I don't know that anything was overtly planned, but I think people were ready for an opportunity. And that's where you have professional agitators, and that's the problem we've got.
It was just pressurized. It was keeping us inside this whole time, this whole crazy, unseen pandemic thing that we had never seen before. Like, tensions rose, and then the next thing you knew was the first opportunity there was. The George Floyd was a tipping point. It was the straw that broke the camel's back, and in more than one way. A lot of ways it's been really harmful. A lot of ways I see great change coming from it. It's just the only time will tell. That's like literally all that's going to come from this is just we need a bunch of people to realize that standing together and speaking out by using our First Amendment is more powerful than destroying a continent because of the fact that.
And if you look at history too, it's like peace will often beget peace, right? You do the peaceful protest, you get heard, and then things can change. It might be slower, but it'll happen. And eventually you get both sides wanting to work together as opposed to battling it out raging war. Okay, we strike against you, and now we're on top. Okay, even if you were to win, overthrow, whatever that might look like, then you have a sense of vengeance and revenge and injustice on the other side that wants to come back against you. So it'll just be back and forth and creating a famous feud like in the West, or even back in the medieval ages. You have the raiding Vikings, whatever.
It's a circle.
Yeah, no matter. I'm just saying, throughout history, you see mankind doing this. I'm gonna conquer and get you, and then they're gonna rise up and then fend off, and then back and forth.
And you can't control somebody. I've talked about this I just put out a podcast, Jesus and Coffee podcast, and put out the same podcast on the Do Things podcast. Is we can't control other people. The only thing we can control is our perspective and our effort.
Right.
And our response.
That's our effort. Any action that we take, we can't control anybody else, and that's what we need to focus. And how do we treat other people? I believe what Jesus said is the absolute best way is that love your neighbor as yourself, and I don't see a lot of that happening across the board.
Right.
No.
Like that's where I think we need to come back to and say, as a country, can we just commit to say, I'm going to treat people how I want to be treated, and I think that ultimately, until we get there, it's just going to continue.
And also too, it's like love your neighbor as yourself, and it's not just the neighbor that you like in your cul-de-sac or within your community that you're comfortable with. It's everyone, because Jesus followed up with like, well, who is your neighbor?
Well, it's the story of the Samaritan, like the Good Samaritan, who is a man who was hated by Jews, yet he helped a Jew. I mean, there was a feud. Like Darren says, Hatfield and McCoy's.
Right.
Like it's that kind of a feud. Kind of a feud.
Exactly.
Right?
And just like you were talking about, in history repeats itself in cycles, and actually in 97, the year of my birth,
You're such a baby.
I know.
Oh, well, not as much of a baby as this guy, but
But in 97, William Strauss and Neil Howe, they wrote this book called The Fourth Turning, and basically what that is, it's this idea that since the 15th century in Anglo-American culture, history repeats itself in a cycle of every 80 to 90 years, and in almost a predictable sense, to where we can look at that and we can go, oh, okay, so this happened 80 years ago. At this point, the Great Depression, right, happened about 80 years ago. 100 years ago now. So 90 to 100 years ago.
Pandemic 100 years ago. So we're on a cycle.
We're on that cycle. It's going to continue, and to me, that's an optimistic thing to say. Like, we've done this before. Like, humanity has done this before with less and conquered.
Yeah, I think that's true. So, but there's, I think it's a big mess, and
it's a cluster.
Until we can actually start treating people the way that we want to be treated, there's not really anything that's going to come out of this that's going to make that much of a difference. So that's I think it's just frustrating, and I think it's overwhelming, and like we've talked about, on top of the COVID, it's like, man,
somber hour on TSTO.
Yeah, somber hour on TSTO.
There's the sad
we
music.
were gonna go into the where is it?
We ask ourselves the tough questions so you don't have to.
Yeah,
that's right. Look, we could. I mean, we don't know sad music. Yeah. Let's go back to DJ horns.
Right. But we need the eye of the tiger.
Right.
That's what we need to do.
So there's stories that are happening that's related to this. I mean, I know that we took a lot of time to talk about that, but I think that's something we needed to talk about. It's really important to talk about. But there's something that happened within all this that kind of made me say, which takes me down the road of, this is not. Everything that's happening violence-wise has nothing to do with this George Floyd thing. Thanks for checking out the Trending Stories Taking Over show. If you like that video, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell so you know whenever we have a new video, and you're aware of any of the live streams when we do a full show. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, on Spotify, anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Go to tstoshow.com, check it out, or watch one of these other videos over here. You're gonna like it. I have a feeling you're gonna love it.